Mic check. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2. Mic check. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2, 3.
Maybe.
Oh, all right. Well, this is going to be a fun audio experiment.
So, Mr. Hogan, you can hear us fairly well.
I can, and I just will have to look at James all night.
Should I try taking my volume down a bit?
Oh, now I got Warner.
All right.
Yeah, the sound's great.
I'm just going to bring my sound down a little bit.
I just took him down to 61 from 100. I don't know if that's everybody or not.
We'll find out.
Ask him to count to 5 for us.
Could you count to 5 for us in Spanish? It did make a difference.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Is that better or is it still
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco.
Mucho.
Maybe.
Oh, all right. Well, this is going to be a fun audio experiment.
So, Mr. Hogan, you can hear us fairly well.
I can, and I just will have to look at James all night.
Should I try taking my volume down a bit?
Oh, now I got Warner. Liz is trying to figure out how to get in, so I'm sending her a text.
Does she need the agenda resent?
Well, the one that was sent didn't have a link that worked. The one that I got, and I went to look at it this afternoon. So I just went into the agendas on the town page, and it worked fine to get me to this. Dan needs to be promoted.
Dan declined to be promoted.
Oh, there he is.
Yes.
I didn't hear what he said.
Can you see me or hear me?
Talk as an attendee.
Hear you.
Okay.
Somebody asked him why he declined to be promoted.
How's that? Is that coming in yet?
No. What part of the country are you in tonight?
Oh, here and there.
You don't want the assassins to know where you are?
No.
Yeah, just so everyone knows where you are broadcasting.
Okay. Thank you. I wonder why I can't get my video to show. Okay. Well, we start the meeting. Is that the hint, Warner?
Hey, Dan.
We're waiting for Liz. Do we have a quorum? Who's there in the room? Just Jim?
No. Jim McMahon is here in the room. So that would be one. And then Paul, we have you. We have Dan, and I think
Dan, this is Dave.
I
Is there a reason you declined to be promoted to a panelist?
Me?
Yes. I tried to promote you twice, and I got a message saying you declined.
I didn't do anything.
All right, let me try again.
Yep. And then Liz. Yeah, well, she's in.
There.
She's.
Oh, good. Liz needs to be promoted too. She just joined.
Okay, promoting her as well.
Thanks, Dave. She got in, but.
All right. Woo.
When was your surgery?
Last Wednesday.
How's it going? Okay?
Yeah, it's slow, because I just. And I'm walking on one crutch now as opposed to two.
Oh, great.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should
We're
start.
past
And
6, so
stop.
we're going to start our broadcast.
Excellent. Okay, so good evening all. Welcome to the May 3rd, 2022 meeting of the Growth Planning Committee. This is a hybrid meeting. We have 3 of the members remote, myself, Paul, and Liz. We also have Eli remote and Werner and Jim at the site, supporting Dave, who's obviously running the video screens behind us. So I'd like to, I kind of just did the introduction of members, I guess. So that's what we have on site. And at this point, I don't see that we have any participants. Is that correct? Anyone else besides the board? And
I saw Carol Morris.
I'm not seeing any.
That's correct. Yes, we have Carol in the audience.
Okay. So thank you, Carol, for joining. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 7 panelists and 1 attendee, or maybe 6 panelists and 1 attendee. Television counts twice. Okay, so I guess we'll just jump right on into it. So number 2 has a bunch of items, A through E, and the first is review draft 10 of the goal policies and strategies.
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna try here is Eli's gonna do a share screen of the document. That way it shows up full screen for everyone, and then in similar fashion to what we've done before, we'll just get started and we'll kind of walk our way through. So Eli, what I have, the document that I have, we'll start on what I believe is page 2 with the historical resources piece, if I'm correct there.
Yeah, I'm pulling that up now.
Warner, I'm a little confused. The agenda I'm looking at for May 3rd says review draft 10, begin on page 19, review chapters on fiscal capacity and future land use, and then all the items for feedback.
Great.
What are you looking at that I'm not looking at?
No, thank you. That's a good point. Yep, we're beginning on page 19. Yep. No, the document that we have has all of the other pages as well.
So the one I pulled up, it is 19, although it says 20 of 23, but it says 19 on the page. It's an orange. There you go.
Yep.
Yep.
There. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with the fiscal capacity section, which is that section's in orange. So the goal that we have here is continue to plan for and finance public facilities and services to accommodate anticipated growth and economic development. First policy is finance existing and future facilities and services in a cost-effective manner. First strategy was written to say identify opportunities to extend public sewer and water and sidewalks when reviewing development proposals. Yeah, and I think we just tweaked that just a little bit with identify cost-effective opportunities when extending public sewer, water, and sidewalks when reviewing development proposals. And that is Planning Board and Planning Department as responsible parties. Next strategy is, and likewise, if anybody has questions or comments, just feel free to jump in, or I'm assuming everybody can hear me fine.
Yep, you're fine.
Okay, great. Next strategy, explore opportunities to work with neighboring communities to plan for and finance shared or adjacent capital investments to increase cost savings and efficiencies. And so that's a strategy assigned to the town manager. Next policy, explore grants available to assist in the funding of capital investments within the community. And so on this one here, we have listed as a consider removing this, and what we just found is that this was very much redundant. I think we had mentioned very similar language before. In other chapters. So that next strategy, seek assistance from SMPDC when identifying appropriate grant opportunities. Again, that's one that was mentioned elsewhere.
Do we have anything else on, any other strategies associated with this policy? On the next page?
No, that's it then for fiscal capacity.
Okay. Then do we remove the policy since we don't have a strategy for it, or?
Well, yeah, that's.
Oh, you're saying that. I'm sorry.
That's
You're
correct.
saying
That's
that.
what we're saying is to just consider removing, what you're seeing there in lines 5 and 6.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
All right, moving along into future land use. So first goal, keep the land use ordinance current and aligned with the comprehensive plan. First policy, regularly review and amend the LUO. This one, first strategy, identify necessary amendments to the LUO on an annual basis. And we have this one listed as a consider removing piece. And I think really what we're saying with this is that we have very similar language in some of these other strategies that essentially say something very similar.
Which ones?
So, even in the next one, perform a review of the LUO for consistency with the comprehensive plan and make recommendations for warrant articles. I mean, that is in and of itself another way of saying, look for necessary amendments to the LUO.
But we put number 3 in there, Werner, after that meeting with the planning board. And all of the, I don't know if staff disagreed, but all of the resident volunteers on the 2 committees agreed that nobody, the planning board wasn't doing this, and the growth planning committee wasn't doing this. And your recommendation was that we periodically review it and consider a subcommittee that would have members from the growth planning and the planning board. And I remember saying, well, what about Conservation Commission? I think they're part of this. And annual might not be necessary, but periodic would certainly seem to be necessary, since there seemed to be a consensus nobody was doing it in town. The Board of Selectmen were not doing it. The only time it happens was when you came forward with an initiative for whatever reason. But there was no review by the residents of the town on a regular basis.
So, I mean, I don't have an issue with that, with having that in there. I think just the thought, when we were looking this over, was that the language was very similar in the next strategy in terms of, the same thing. But I'm happy to discuss it with folks. Again, we're just trying to remove, some some redundancies here. But, if you feel that it's necessary to keep that in, I don't have an issue with it. But I think it's pretty similar with what the next,
One says to do it once in the next 10 years, and the other says you should do it periodically or regularly or annually. I think there's a big difference.
Yep.
We could be at year 9 and begin our comprehensive review when we should have been doing it in year 2, 3, 4, whatever.
So do we want to add the word periodic or biannual or something of that nature for, in line number 4?
Well, conduct a comprehensive review. That means one time during this period of time. I think that's what that was meant to say. And so, when you attach a time frame to it, somebody should put a time frame on when that should happen. We don't have time frames here. But number 3 says, in addition to that, look at it annually. I think annually is probably excessive. I'd be happy with periodic.
What does periodic actually mean, though?
I think we're saying something similar. If you look at the suggested language on line number 4, instead of that, conduct a comprehensive review of the LUO to modernize it, we're suggesting that perform a review of the LUO. And, we could insert within that strategy, perform, a periodic, or if you want to put a time frame in it, I think that, that would be fine in there. Or if you want to keep number 3, I think that's fine as well. I think they say very similar things.
I think you could combine them, take out 3 and use the wording on the right for number 4, but just put in a time frame. So it's a concrete thing that needs to be done at a certain time or within a certain time.
But the point is, I think we were encouraged by our planners to do this regularly, and everybody agreed to many things that, well, this has been here for 20 years and nobody's looked at it, and this has been around because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it became clear that the planning board, very overworked, can't do this, doesn't do it. And it's never really been our responsibility. And we were looking for a solution.
Yeah, I think we could actually build on your suggestions here and combine 3, 4, and 9, which are all talking about amending the land use ordinance. They do need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Whether, on an annual basis, trying to do all the land use ordinance would be a lot of work. But I could certainly see where we want to have all the land use ordinances reviewed against the comprehensive plan, update them, modernize them, in 5 years or in 6 years, sometime within the next 10. Right, and so that you could set out a plan where you're doing a third of them or a quarter of them each year for over 4 or 5 years. So that's a lot of work, especially if you start changing them or you feel need to be modernized. Now you got to bring them before the town for a vote. And, that takes, 6 months, easy. Right, so.
And I think, yeah, I think we're mixing a lot of different things here. Making it conform with the comprehensive plan would be a normal thing to do after a new comprehensive plan gets adopted. That's pretty straightforward, and that should be done within a reasonable amount of time after the comp plan comes out. That's an item agenda in itself. The second thing is modernize, conduct it to modernize it. That is separate. There may be items in there that have nothing to do with the comp plan, yet should be updated and should be revised because we haven't done it in 20 years. That I thought was, that was the sense of that meeting when we had the input from the planning board members.
Yeah.
Was I at a different meeting?
No, I just think that's something that could be done at the same time.
It could
Right.
be. It could be, but I don't want to lose the separate pieces of that. There's 2 separate objectives there.
Sure. I got you. I understand.
So, can
I don't want it to just be make it to conform to the comprehensive plan because that will have missed the boat with respect to.
Modernize. We definitely have to modernize.
I think it may be worth just considering that, all land use ordinances, all land use ordinance amendments, are required to be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So, considering that as the basis, I think even if you look at strategy 3, it's unwritten there, but it basically is saying the same, identify necessary amendments to the LUO on an annual basis for consistency with the comprehensive plan is kind of the subtext. So, Dan suggested kind of combining 3, 4, and 9. And so maybe by taking the staff recommended language for 4, but adding a time frame, that would be able to include all kind of what you're getting at is saying, it's almost continuous. Like there's an opportunity at any time to modernize and review the land use ordinance. It doesn't have to be at a 5-year comprehensive review or something like that. So we could add the word, regularly or continuously or
Yeah. I mean, I do like the idea of putting a time frame on them, because if you put it regularly, you can regularly forget,
Mhm.
right? And they just don't get done, right? So I do like the idea of having some type of time frame on it. I think trying to review all of them on an annual basis would be a lot of work for somebody, for a group even, right? Especially, like I said, if you have to get into making some amendments, then you got to get them voted on if you're making changes, right? And that takes time and effort. So, I mean, if we got through them all within a 3 or 5 year period after the plan's approved, I think that'd be, and you could divvy them up in a way that you're getting the ones that we are most concerned about to get consistency, if there are any, right? Thoughts? It just seems like we could put it all together into one strategy, because
I agree.
if you're going to change it, let's modernize it. Let's do all that. I don't,
Yeah.
not touch it again.
Yeah. So combine 3, 4, and 9 into the new wording in number 4 and add a time frame of what? Every 3 years?
Every 3 years, maybe. I mean, once you do it once, it wouldn't be bad to go back through them on a third every year and just making sure they're still good. How's that sound, Warren? Is that a doable process? What do you think?
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
is that too
I
much?
think I think it's fair to recognize that that's that it's not an insignificant task to do
Right.
do exactly that and that's not to say that something like that wouldn't couldn't and that's I mean that could be an RFP project
Okay.
To be done, kind of a next step piece that doesn't necessarily mean that is just a that's something that just falls directly to staff to go through to make all of those, analysis and recommendations. I think it is the next step in the process. I mean, that's what you do. You adopt a comp plan, and then you go back and you look at your,
Right.
you look at your policies, your procedures, and make sure everything's in alignment, and you look at your ordinances. I mean, that's, because otherwise, our points of discussion, well, why else are you doing it,
Right.
Exactly.
And so, I think it's, it is tricky with it, to put a time frame onto it, because what does that look like? Is that 5 amendments, 10 amendments, or 30 amendments? Like
Right.
that's, I don't think we can answer that piece of it. So, ultimately, I think if we are bringing forward, if we're bringing forward amendments, on a biannual basis, I think something along those lines that says, all right, as long as we're consistently bringing forward amendments to bring the ordinance into alignment, that's what we're looking for. Like, we don't want it to just sit on the shelf. We want there to be things that are being brought forward. But like I said, if you were doing, I think the whole entire document, that in and of itself is almost an RFP size project.
Okay. So by number 3, in that on an annual basis, in other words, you're always bringing forward changes to the land use ordinance. Not necessarily reviewing all land use ordinance every year and making changes.
Right, and it's not with the expectation that you're bringing forward everything for the the LUO within a year's time frame. I know it doesn't say that, but I don't think it's I don't think it's unrealistic to say, hey, we want to see an amendment or amendments brought forward each year, as it relates to the land use ordinance.
can I suggest possible phrasing? Identify necessary amendments to the land use ordinance for consistency with the comprehensive plan and make recommendations for warrant articles.
So what you just told me is we're going to do it once and never again. Was that our intent?
No, I just kind of borrowed the language from 3, which I thought was
So
the,
that's great language for one of the goals.
Could you add just the word continuously first? Continuously identify necessary amendments. And then what Eli said. Because like Werner said, it's an ongoing thing. Like,
Right, but we have one obligation, the town has an obligation to make it consistent with the comp plan. That's the first logical step to do. But that's not the only challenge we identify, is all I'm saying. And I don't want it to be lost. We got the planning board together with us and we met, and that was a key takeaway that I got, that, and they're the ones who were most familiar with this much more than we are with the land use.
so you want to keep number 3?
I want to, I would be happy with combining some sense of modernizing with a regular review or a periodic review, in addition to the first goal, which is to make it conform. But that's kind of an easy analysis in one respect, making sure it conforms. The second is, I would think if all the people who deal with this in town would have a wish list, Werner would probably have one, Eli would probably have a shorter one, people on the planning board would probably have a list, and maybe we would have a list, and then we'd sort of say, okay, what do we do with this? Is this really a problem? You know, and that's why, Werner, it was your idea, a subcommittee that would take a look at this.
Right. No, I don't disagree, and I just don't think that the amended language, I think it supports that, but
if our only objective was consistency with the comprehensive plan, and we didn't have an objective to modernize and evaluate things that we haven't changed in 20 or 30 years, that because nobody is doing this regularly.
Well, what if it says continuously or regularly identify necessary amendments to the LUO? And what do you say, Eli?
Eli's was great for
Yeah, but just add
step 1.
continuously or regularly as the first word before identify necessary amendments.
Well, I think that is, I would find that very confusing, because you're going to do a thorough job once. You're going to look at the comprehensive plan, you're going to look at your land use ordinance, and you're going to try to do the best you can at that time to make sure we're consistent. And maybe there's 2 things or 5 things or whatever that have to be changed.
Well, what if you're doing that every 3 years? Somebody said 3 years, so if...
Except you only change your comp plan every 8 years, 10 years, 12
Right,
years, whatever.
But,
Yeah.
right, so if it's truly 10 years, you have three opportunities within a 10-year period to make changes. If you
Okay,
if you're
maybe I'm
proactive-
seeing this in a very
Well, what-
different way than you guys are, and if you all think I'm crazy, that's fine.
No, I don't think you're crazy. How would you rewrite it?
I would do it the way we had it before, which we came up with, which was identify necessary amendments to the LUO on an annual basis. That was number 3. I would reorder that. I would first prioritize the one that should happen first, which is following the adoption of a comprehensive plan, making sure you conform. And then I would hope that in the next 8 or 10 years, someone would look at this, other than someone with special interests coming in with particular needs, and that's the only time we change anything. I think there should be an opportunity for the public to look at this and say, hey, we've never done this, but I think it's 2 separate exercises. I think it's
Yeah.
2 separate objectives.
Yep, I see what you're saying. So make number 3 the new wording on the right of number 4. And make number 4 what's now number 3.
Except I wouldn't require it to be done annually. That's an overkill. From
Yeah,
never doing it to annually would be a big change.
Right, maybe, it's It's either a continuous thing if there are resources, staff to do that, or it's a mid-year mark, the 5-year mark, you know, the halfway point between the next plan.
Yeah.
Checkpoint.
So let me ask this question, because this may be hung up a little bit on. What do we mean by modernized? Because what I see would be,
That's not in number 3. That's in a
Yeah.
separate one. Where was that?
that's 4, number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, I think 3 and 4 are basically the same.
Okay.
But the other one, which we changed, you know, trying to reach conformity with the comprehensive plan is a noble goal in itself.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna keep number 3, but change it to, well, so this is the question. Is this the wish of the committee? Number 3 would read, identify necessary amendments to the land use ordinance on a regular basis. And at a later date, you know, every strategy will be given a priority. And so maybe that was going to be the opportunity to address what the priority of the 2 is. That strategy is going to be listed second, and above it, the strategy will read, perform a review of the land use ordinance for consistency with the comprehensive plan and make recommendations for warrant articles.
Fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Nail it.
Okay, thanks.
Next.
All right, next strategy, number 5. Review uses in, so we have 2 that are here. So original language was conduct a survey to collect input from residents on specific types of land uses that are desirable in the free enterprise and farm and forest zones. And you know, we've recommended review uses in free enterprise and farm and forest zones for consistency with a comprehensive plan and make recommendations for warrant articles. And this is left with the planning department and remove conservation commission from that.
But Werner, didn't we just punt that issue in the comprehensive plan and said, well, it's confusing why some things are in one and other things are in the other, and someone really needs to look at it, but we all agreed we weren't the ones to do that, and that's why this one was in here, that somebody take a serious look at those 2 zones, and should they be, you know, why were some of the uses in one but not the other? Do we need the 2 zones? Whatever. We did not solve that problem in the comprehensive plan, so consistency with the comprehensive plan doesn't mean anything, in my view.
Well, part of it, I think, is you look back at, you look at, you know, over the course of the past, you know, what do we have, 50 years of zoning that the town has had? You know, and I would envision that a comprehensive, you know, review of that would be to look at, you know, so what have we had for uses in those zones over the course of the years? How many of those have actually come forward, you know, in terms of, you know, those types of uses that, you know, that have either been proposed or not, you know, and, you know, you would take that and compare that with the, you know, some of the character statements, you know, that are developed in the plan, and look at what types of uses then potentially don't match with the character of what you've described elsewhere in the plan, as well as looking at uses that just haven't come forward in the past 50 years. I mean, I think that's, you know, that's how you would, you know, begin a process of looking at that.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Werner, and that was well described in what they proposed. But in shifting this to consistency with the comp plan, where we haven't addressed this issue and haven't had a thorough discussion of it, and doing everything you say that needs to be done, I agree with you. That was what we concluded. That discussion needed to happen, and I thought it was well captured in what they proposed. I don't think it's well captured in consistency with the comp plan, and I don't think it's consistent with what you just explained, how you would go about it, because consistency with the comp plan means, okay, let's look at the comp plan, let's see what the character is, and let's see if we agree with that. Let's see whether the words agree with the comp plan character. But we did not change the comp plan character. We steered clear of that because it was too large for our time and scope. We did not want to solve that problem.
So is the idea here then to to do this in preparation for the next revision of the comp plan?
I don't think we preordained that.
Yeah.
We
Well,
just,
I mean, I think it's, you know, the topic's a good topic, and it's probably a great topic for all the zones, right? I mean, one of the things that was brought forward by the consultants was to consider changing our zoning to match our growth
right.
transitional areas, right? Which we really didn't want to deal with.
And we don't need to separately say consistency with the comp plan because we already just said that. We're going to look at everything.
Yeah.
To make sure we have consistency. We don't need to pick out specific ones.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, it still needs to go through, any change to the ordinance would have to go through our committee anyways to review and
Of course.
whether it's consistent, right? So, we probably can leave that piece out. And you probably could drive a bus through some of it anyways, right? Unless someone came back and said, hey, we want to make 10-acre lots, something like that, which would go against what our ideas are, what the comprehensive plan's saying. But I mean, it's not narrow what you can do in these zones per the plan. It's fairly open. So there is opportunity here to really look at these two zones and honestly look at all of our zones and determine what's really important to be in those and what can be pulled out.
Why not conduct a survey? Why was that changed?
Well, I'm not sure it was changed. That's probably one of the processes. It's just it wasn't specific. That's all. They're making I'll let Werner speak for himself. But when I'm reading it, I'm realizing, if I'm doing this, I'm probably going to conduct a survey and get feedback from people.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, we don't have to choose the specific method. I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's not necessary in the comp plan.
Yeah. You want to try to leave a broad brush for people to work within the plan.
So would we want to amend the language to just simplify it, remove the consistency with the comprehensive plan section so that it just read review uses in free enterprise and farm and forest zones and make recommendations for warrant articles?
Sure.
I'm okay with that. I mean, it's going to have to be consistent anyways.
Right. Okay, does that sound good to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. So moving along to number 6. The original strategy says educate staff, board, commission, and committee members and the public about the LUO. We have suggested language that says create educational curriculum for boards and committee members that are responsible for land use decisions. I think one of the things that, that we see is that, there's a lot of resources out there for, that's available for the boards, and that's something that, that could be a little bit better organized and put forward to the boards and committees.
Right.
Yeah.
And by extension, made available to the public. Right.
Yeah, that's the only piece left out.
Yep, and you could certainly add that in for boards, committees, and the public.
Yep. No, I'm good with that. Good idea. Better said. Otherwise, you got to educate. Right? How do you do that, right?
Some
All
of
right,
us
so-
skip the education.
So the strategy will read, create educational curriculum for boards, committees, and the public that are responsible for land use decisions.
Yeah, the public doesn't work in that
Yeah.
sentence that way.
You could put there the public at the end. So
Yeah.
leave the same thing and just say, and make available to the public.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
All right, next goal, ensure orderly growth and prevent sprawl. First policy, encourage growth adjacent to current village centers. Growth should be compatible with and integrated with the existing infrastructures and built environment. And so we already talked about, number 9. Are we still good with that in terms of, with the work that we did with, 3 and 4?
Yeah, I don't think we need it. I think
Yeah, we don't need it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then, number 10, conduct a build-out analysis on a periodic basis to understand opportunities and constraints to growth. And so we left that alone and left that as a planning department item.
Yep.
Next strategy, number 11, review the growth management permit process on a periodic basis to determine its effectiveness in directing growth in a manner that is consistent with this comprehensive plan. And we have reviewed the impact of growth management permits on a periodic basis to determine its effectiveness in directing growth in a manner that is consistent with this comprehensive plan. So really, the only piece that we have that's different here is adding planning department along with growth planning committee.
that's fine.
Number 12, encourage growth in areas where public infrastructure exists. And so we have a suggestion to consider removing, since it's already implied in number 11 and the comp plan in general. But
Yep.
Number
Okay.
13, develop and fund a long-term plan for sewer and water expansion to accommodate future growth. And we have, that same strategy, but instead to just remove growth planning committee, add planning department, so have that as a venture between planning department and public works.
Yep, makes sense.
How do we not ignore in that one competing demands for sewage capacity for existing dwelling units? We have dwelling units in low-lying areas. We have dwelling units in sea level rise places. We have top tier water pollution issues at Goose Rocks Beach, which may or may not be associated with a couple of hundred homes that should be on sewer that are not on sewer. I don't want, I think those are competing interests for the sewer money. Different people will disagree on what's more important or how to do it. But I don't want the comprehensive plan to come down in favor of new sewer connections when we could be putting the same public money towards solving some public health issues which exist already. That's more in the natural resources area, I understand, but I don't, the thumb of the money should not automatically go to the new subdivision when we have long-term problems that we haven't solved or addressed.
Paul, there is, I'm just scrolling back to I think it's the facilities section. There's a strategy that reads, ensure that the maintenance of aging sewer sorry, my computer. Ensure that the maintenance of aging sewer infrastructure is a priority. And that is a strategy under the goal of provide public sewer service in areas designated as growth areas. Now, I don't know if that is what you're
That
going.
doesn't help. That doesn't help me at all. All that says is we've got 200 houses connected or 300 houses connected already. Let's make sure the pipes are good to them. That's wonderful and important, and we need to fund for that. But a recently departed public works director said to me, "I wonder what we would have happened if we had connected all those houses to sewer that we should have done 40 years ago, whether we'd have these problems at Goose Rocks Beach."
So
It
adding
would have.
sewer, et cetera, to areas that currently
No, yeah,
are on
it's-
septic
It's,
and,
it's tricky because of the boxes we put these things in. This is under the category of, I lost my page because I went back to, what item is that? I'm sorry.
So we're talking about adding sewer to existing homes. that don't
Right.
have it, right, and
Right.
making sure that that's available or considered as part of the long-term planning for sewer and water.
Right.
So how do we
Which is,
pick that up, right? I mean, that's a good point. I'm not sure where we capture that. We've captured maintaining what we have, and we've captured planning for the future of growth. But it could be future growth of the sewer system. You know, there's an additional 400 houses that are already here that we need to add because of whatever reason. How's that worked into the plan?
And I think what I'm hearing is that this, and maybe this could be clarified better, because what this isn't saying look for areas to extend the sewer into undeveloped areas. Like that's not what this is saying. But I think maybe there could be some clarifying language that that
it's
we're looking
the term
at
future growth that makes you think exactly what you just said.
Well, if you have one
Undeveloped areas.
strategy that says, look at ways to increase density in existing developed areas, then, in hand with that is also looking at a long-term plan, for your sewer and water. Expansion isn't necessarily, new lines extending, into, undeveloped areas necessarily, as much as it is also looking at, your current infrastructure areas that, that could see increases in density to begin with.
How about you just take away to accommodate future growth?
Well, we have a couple of problems. The category that I brought up this comment, perhaps in the wrong place, because our goal is ensure orderly growth and prevent sprawl. Encourage growth adjacent to village centers. Growth should be compatible, integrated with existing infrastructure and built environment. All of that, in my mind, is new dwelling units, new structures, new uses. It has nothing to do with existing buildings in neighborhoods that are 100% built out with no vacant land, where sewer never got there because it was never deemed whatever. We didn't have the money, it wasn't necessary. But sewer only has so much capacity, and the town only has so much bonding and fiscal ability. And as I read this, we are placing no priority at all, unless someone can find it for me, on looking to see where we have existing public health problems as a result of non-connections to sewer, and that's also important.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we-
There's a strategy here that I'm finding, and maybe this is to what you're saying. It reads, evaluate adding existing developed areas in environmentally sensitive locations onto public sewer.
Okay.
I do remember that. Where is that?
So that's in, the goal is provide public sewer service in areas designated as growth areas, but the policy is to monitor and prepare for the need for sewage facilities in growth areas and where sewer expansion will benefit environmentally sensitive areas. And I think that's why it's kind of buried in there.
What page is that on?
It's
On
in the
this draft?
on this draft. It's in the public facilities and services section, which is a green section.
I'll never find it that way. Tell me the page at the bottom of the page. Don't you have page numbers?
Yeah, but I am looking at a document with track changes. But what I'll do is, and I'm hesitant to scroll on the screen that it would give.
I know. Don't do that. Don't do that.
But
sorry.
So I think I found it here. It's on page 12.
Thank you, Werner.
I was going to say, only just take that as an action and make sure that we do have that piece covered, and if not, that we make sure that that's included in the analysis that they have to run, because it is important, and it's likely going to change as sea level rises, et cetera, right? The impact on groundwater and so forth.
Which number was it there, Eli? I got back there.
Great. So under goal number 8, do you see that?
Yep.
Provide public sewer. So I don't know what the numbering is because it was inserted. The committee inserted it during a meeting, so the numbering scheme is a little off. But it's the second to last one under that goal.
Yeah. So that would be. It looks like either. Yeah. It's between 11 and 12. It says evaluate adding existing developed areas and environmentally sensitive locations onto public sewer.
Yeah, and the reason it is buried is because it's talking about growth areas. So let's just see if there's a better place for that. I'll take a look. Because it is buried there.
Yeah, and
Again,
it could be that we can expand that goal so that it matches the policy where it says designated growth areas and where sewer expansion will benefit environment. So borrow that language.
Yep. That would work. Thanks.
Sounds good.
I'll put a note in there if that sounds good to everybody.
Yep.
All right, so next strategy, traditional neighborhood design should guide the expansion of land in the village, and we are suggesting a slight change to that to say incorporate traditional neighborhood design principles in the subdivision regulations for growth areas.
Hey, Werner, what's the number on that one? Sorry.
That looks to be number 14.
14.
Next strategy says track new development by type and location to guide a minimum of 75% of new municipal growth-related capital investments into the growth area. And this one was just one that we said to consider removing, in that it's not a practice that we currently have. It's not applicable based on our size and current practices.
Yeah, there's no state requirement for that kind of thing, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, all right. I'm
I'm
okay
fine with that.
Yeah.
Can I interject with a new one here?
A new one? All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the state, our legislatures passed and the governor signed last week this big major, almost radical change to local zoning. I can give you a 30-second. I've sent information to people. We didn't know what would get passed, but basically single-family lots can now, Werner, you can stop me if I misrepresent this in any way, but single-family lots could become up to 4 units. Everybody can put in up to 2 accessory dwelling units on their single-family lots. Any area that's, I'm a little unclear on this one, Werner. Any area that's a growth area, the density could go from 4 units per single family lot to 2.5 times 4 is 10 if it's affordable. What are some other highlights, Werner? I'm sure you've been thinking about this a little.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit some of the the pieces there. And this is one of those ones that is going to take a little bit of time to unravel in terms of seeing how exactly it's going to affect local zoning. I would be hesitant to really get into the weeds in this current version of the comp plan with that, since this is brand new legislation that that nobody's really had a chance to kind of break apart and say, all right, what exactly are the impacts that we're going to see here? I know Eli can speak a little bit to this. He's been looking at this one, a lot closer than I have, but ultimately.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we get into the weeds, Werner. All I'm suggesting is we have an 8 or 10 year plan out there that won't mention the most significant change in land use. And I'm suggesting we should have a whether in this bucket or some other bucket, that we should examine the land use ordinance for consistency with the new state law. It is a state law now. It's not a hypothetical.
I think that's a fair strategy to have in there. It's something that we know we're going to do anyways. But if you want to have that inserted as a strategy, I'm perfectly fine with that.
I agree.
Is this also targeted towards growth areas that are identified as growth?
Yeah, there are specific references to growth areas. One of them is the affordable. I think if you put affordable in a growth area, you got a higher density, you got a density bonus in effect. I think that's what I remember, it being different than other areas in town. But I could be wrong on that.
Correct.
But I know there's definitely a density bonus for affordable housing, which is defined in the law, of course.
Yeah.
So are you imagining a strategy that would read something like ensure consistency with all state laws that regulate zoning or that regulate local land use ordinances?
Well, I would specifically reference this law.
Yeah.
Okay.
We obviously have to follow all state law, but it will look pretty silly, I think, 4 years from now if we have a plan that was adopted after this law came into effect and we didn't even mention it.
Yeah, I think you could just simply, without getting real wordy with it, just, review land use ordinance for consistency with LD 2003, which regulates housing density.
Great. Okay.
One thought that kind of came to my head then is to look at, and we don't have to do it right now, but I want to look at what flexibility we have in the plan to adjust our growth areas.
Yeah, I think we should look at that now.
Right. Because
of LD 2003.
Right, that's going to drive some consequences that we aren't intending on based on the size of what we set our growth areas. We need to make sure we can pull that back if need be in order to manage it.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. Because prior to this, growth areas were really more somewhat infrastructure and density driven, and this law changes that.
Sure.
Growth areas may wind up needing to be redefined. There is language in there though that does address just the presence of infrastructure. And I think that language in there, it was, it's kind of an either or, type bit. So and I think what it did is it recognizes that not every community has identified growth areas, but they may have infrastructure.
Right.
And so, so you have some of this, like I said, either or language that, that focuses in on that. But you're right. I mean, it may be what it means is that, those growth areas need to be, a little bit more tightly defined in terms of, in terms of where they are, and maybe the purpose of them changes somewhat as well. Now that the law has kind of given growth areas a little bit of a different, well, not a little bit, but different weight.
Does the law address only growth areas that this can happen?
No, every lot in your town and mine.
So I'm on 2 acres. I could build 3 houses in my backyard,
No, if there's already one house there, if
right?
it's a developed lot, then you're limited to 2 accessory dwelling units, one of which could be in your house and one of which could be in your yard.
Just to clarify, because this gets muddy really fast, and
Yeah.
we still have a lot to go through today. But
family.
and we'd be happy to kind of get more into this, but there is still going to be a period of rulemaking through DECD, and so until that happens, there's still, it's a little hard to really know the interpretation of some of this and any further rulemaking that may occur through that process. So,
And the other
That's
piece
a good
of
point,
it
Eli.
is
So
that it also, the language also, that was passed, I think did make it clear that it wasn't, that the law wasn't intended to supersede, a subdivision decision, that may have specified. So it didn't overrule, for example, a previous, subdivision decision.
can it overrule a state-approved comp plan? Because likely, yes. So
Well, what is likely to occur is that, it is likely, well, you're going to have a lot of comprehensive plans that aren't going to be consistent with this law.
yeah,
So there's a kind of a multitude of things that towns will have to address, notwithstanding just the, the land use ordinance piece, but also the comp plan piece. So I think Paul's suggestion is a good one, that we put in that language, knowing that it's here, to do a review.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
I agree. And again, I just want to make sure we also look at how we define the growth areas within the comp plan. Our 3 areas, our growth, transitional, and rural. And maybe there's a way to be a little bit generic and have that identified in an ordinance. It's easier to change than a plan, but let's take a look.
okay, so I've added a strategy that reads review land use ordinance to ensure consistency with LD 2003. I'll find what the chapter law reference number is, and I'll put that in once I find that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so next goal is ensure public access to the coast. First policy, establish new public access points. First strategy for that was identify coastal properties that may be appropriate for more public access. And that's with Recreation Committee. And we just suggested a removal of Conservation Commission and adding Planning Department. So that would be Rec and Planning.
Okay.
And next strategy is to promote land acquisition for the establishment of access for small watercraft. And we're just suggesting to change that policy to Board of Selectmen.
That works.
All right, next goal is preserve Kennebunkport's open space and rural character. First policy, identify land that warrants protection and set priorities. So strategy initially reads, in collaboration with the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, prepare a town-wide plan for the acquisition, protection, and management of open space. The plan should identify tracts that warrant protection, including a schedule for acquisition, identify funding mechanisms, and address management issues. And so we just simplified that a little bit and are suggesting it to read, in collaboration with the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, formalize a plan that includes goals and a process for land conservation and present recommendations to select board. And so for that, as far as responsible parties, we're suggesting the removal of planning board, adding conservation commission, so it would be Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, Conservation Commission, and Planning Department.
Werner, I assume that language would be broad enough to include existing land holdings? So
Yes.
they could determine that, oh, this parcel here, we should prevent from ever being developed because of its whatever. And we're not just talking about new land acquisition.
Yeah, no, I think that's broad enough to include. I mean, do you have something in mind that that you're thinking of that?
Well, we just have the town owns, I don't know, 70 parcels of land. Some of them we may want to get rid of, some of them we may want to conserve. Some of them we may want to use the money from getting rid of them to conserve other land. You'd want that flexibility, or some land may become available, of course, where you want to buy or you want the trust to buy or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's broad enough to include those, those scenarios.
Isn't there a state goal to conserve a certain amount of land?
In each, yeah.
I mean, that I have not seen, a specific, that says, towns should consider preserving X, in terms of percentage. That's a big discussion, that I think that as part of developing that goal, I think that's a fine piece to identify, a percentage, that you look at.
Well, we're already at what, like 25%?
I thought Tom had mentioned that during one of the calls. I'm sorry, Jim, what did you say?
I said we're at like 25% right now, right? I mean, the conservation.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I thought Tom had mentioned that in one of the calls, and like we were very close.
Yeah, it's close to that. It's close to that number. I don't have the exact number at hand, but
Yeah.
but I think that's that's a bigger discussion. But I think it's a valid one to have to say what should a community's overall goal in terms of land conservation, what should that be?
Right.
I think it makes sense. I mean, I think what Paul's
I
saying.
can barely hear James.
I can't put this. I'd have to put this thing in my mouth. Okay, thanks. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Okay. If we're gonna purchase another piece of property, we should only be holding on to so much, and to balance it out for tax purposes. To kind of bridge on what Paul was saying, if we're gonna look at a desirable piece of property, I agree, we should be relinquishing something else. So.
Well, and I think, that strategy, I think it, allows, for opportunity for that. I could see, I see there being a discussion, that strikes a balance between, quality versus quantity. There's, that idea of, just, collecting land just for the sheer acreage of it, but then there's also those locations where you may say, yep, this one is very specific and very special for specific reasons. That would warrant its preservation.
Right, I agree with that. I don't think we should be chasing property just to purchase property and gobble it up.
Right.
to
And
conserve.
this is basically acknowledging that we have all this land and we really don't have a plan, and we should probably have a plan.
Right.
They're good. I think
Yep.
we're good.
So, next strategy, identify all land that has the potential to support agriculture. And this one is just, it's information that's already available. So we are suggesting to consider removing that because, we already have resources. We already have soil maps that are available for that.
Okay.
Next strategy says establish green belts and public parks to preserve open space between established areas of development. This is one I think has been mentioned before, we have a suggestion of either removing it or to reword it to say support Kennebunkport Conservation Trust in its goals of connection of open space. And we have that as, planning board and planning department. But I think that's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, I like the support the trust because that's basically been their goal to try to have interconnected greenways. I think it would be helpful to explain briefly why you do this because I don't think it's obvious.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, we could flesh that out just a little bit because that is one of their stated goals in terms of those connections.
Yeah, and it's kind of embodied in the one below it because you're trying to have space for wildlife, endangered species, I would add, pollinators, etc. If they don't have all that connected space, we're going to kill them all.
So how do you feel about combining the two so that it would read support Kennebunkport Conservation Trust in its goal of connection of open space to allow uses of those compatible with wildlife, endangered species, and environmentally sensitive areas? Something like that.
To me, like, preserving open space is kind of maintaining the character of the town where we drive around and we see, wooded areas.
Right.
I don't consider green belts or parking public park. I mean, I like public parks, there's no doubt, but, I also don't consider it like a Connecticut where it's on every other block or whatever. We don't try to look to do that wherever we can. I wanted to maintain the character, which is that open space of wooded areas.
Yeah, natural fields.
Exactly.
woods.
Right, that are connected.
If that may be
The
for
point is if
biking,
you
hunting,
don't-
and whatever.
Right, we're replacing that
That's
section
right.
about green
Yeah,
belts
we're-
and public parks.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think what you said, Eli, I think that works.
Yeah, I like the new one.
If you take the support piece in the right-hand column and add it in 24 and add it to 25, I think that works.
Okay.
Okay, so if we're good with that, since we combined those two, the next strategy, number 26, educate the public about the benefits of conservation easements, and so that's listed with the Conservation Commission. So we left that one as is. Next strategy, consider amending the LUO to include practices that help preserve open space and enable density in appropriate locations, such as transfer of development rights. And so we're suggesting the removal of this only just because transfer development rights programs, don't tend to work in small communities that don't have significant enough of what they call sending and receiving areas. For those types of programs, they really work more effectively on a countywide basis, and our government structure just isn't set up that way. So we're recommending the removal of this strategy.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Next strategy, establish a municipal fund from impact fees for land conservation and recreation. And so for this strategy, we're suggesting the removal of Conservation Commission, but adding Planning Department and Town Manager. So it would be Planning Department, Town Manager, and Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
You know, going back to 27, don't we do, if you take out the such as transfer of development rights and just look at what it's saying is include practices that help preserve open space and enable density in appropriate locations, which means, you know, you could have cluster housing in a certain location. You preserve an open space and you got, and I think we're dealing with that in other places, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have identified that, you know, we've identified that before, but you're right, Dan. I mean, you know, you remove the transfer of development rights piece, and it's a fine strategy to have in terms of, you know, the encouragement of practices. I mean, that would be a subdivision reg. You know, that would be more of a typical subdivision reg. Look at, but.
I mean, it should be somewhere in our plan that allow them to do that. I mean, because we have the ordinance that covers cluster housing, right?
Yep.
So
We do,
we want
you
to
know.
have that supported some way within our plan.
Yep. I think it is, you know, if I were to add anything as it relates to cluster development, is that it should, you know, it's something that should include all types of housing, you know, not just,
Sure.
single family homes.
Yep.
Well,
No, I'm okay with that.
so Dan, are you suggesting we keep it and delete the such as?
Yes, unless we've got this somehow dealt with in another section. If we dealt with it in under housing or something like that, then it's covered. But if we don't have it covered, we ought to have something there to support
Assume we
what
have-
we already have as an ordinance.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't know whether it's covered someplace else. I know we've talked about this because it's obviously here.
Eli, is that something we can look
I'll add
at?
a note, and if it's not sufficiently covered, we'll leave it just how it is, but removing the TDR clause.
Yep.
And if it is covered, we'll just remove it.
Okay, good.
Just quickly before we move on past 28, I had a note in here from the town manager. She had just a recommended language change that simply would be changed to say, establish a development impact fee to fund land conservation and recreation, just recognizing the mechanism by which the select board would establish the municipal fund.
Yeah, that's better.
That's fine. You assign it to her. The town manager.
She's in there.
I think she was in there.
Yep.
So there's going to be a fee tacked on to somebody developing that goes to conservation and recreation?
Yeah, I mean, that's the suggestion. I mean, it doesn't necessarily spell out like for what, and that would be a thing for the Board of Selectmen to decide, whether or not that, where they want that to apply, so for what type of development, I mean, I've seen different things. Sometimes you have an impact fee that's assigned for a brand new house, for example, as opposed to it being assigned to, say, a percentage of every type of permit fee. So, in other words, you would only pick it up on, say, maybe a new build as opposed to like somebody doing a deck.
So you're talking more than the development. Like you're talking.
I mean, it could be either one. I mean, it could be something that you could capture at the development stage. So, like at the subdivision stage, as opposed to the individual permit. I mean, there's I think multiple ways you could do that.
Yeah, I have concerns that I just don't like. You start driving up the costs of living. In a way, you get a guy that does and bear with me here. So this is everything. Like if I go in and I'm not a developer, I'm an actual person. Like the example you just used is a deck. Like what would be the fee to me if I was going to build a deck?
Well, I'm not suggesting any fees.
But it's open ended.
You know, what I'm saying is that it could, you know, depending on what the selectmen, you know, could decide with it, you know, it's, you know, do you do something for anything and everything?
Yeah.
Or do you specifically limit it to specific types of projects?
Yeah.
You know, like that,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. you
Right.
know.
Yeah, I just draw concerns that it drives the price up to make it more expensive for people, but.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting one or the other. I'm just
Right.
saying that it could be, you know, it could be anywhere along, you know, whatever the
Yep.
selectmen would decide.
Okay.
Okay. I'm okay with the strategy.
All right. Moving on to the next goal, maintain Kennebunkport's small-town character. First policy, maintain the aesthetic, historic, and architectural character of Kennebunkport's neighborhoods. First strategy, encourage connecting streets, a pedestrian-friendly environment, and small-scale neighborhood commercial services that are geared towards serving local residents. We have that identified for Planning Board and Planning Department. Next strategy, preserve Goose Rocks Beach as a safe, limited use, and family-oriented beach. And that strategy is assigned to Board of Selectmen and Beach Advisory Committee. Next strategy is develop the village parcel in a manner that is consistent with Kennebunkport's small-town character. We have that at Planning Board and Planning Department.
Okay.
All right, next goal, plan for a changing climate. And that first policy is steer growth away from areas that will be vulnerable to hazards caused by climate change. So first strategy is revise the LUO to discourage new development in areas that are likely to be impacted by sea level rise and groundwater rise that is induced by sea level rise. We have a revision to that says develop standards for new development in areas that are vulnerable to sea level rise and groundwater rise that is induced by sea level rise.
Okay.
And next strategy, prepare a master plan for the use of the 70 town-owned parcels. The plan should be consistent with the requirements of adapting to a changing climate. And we have a modification of that says complete. I think that should be complete and maintain the inventory of town-owned parcels and research allowed uses. Climate change impacts should be considered for future uses. And that's Board of Selectmen and Planning Department.
Okay. Good by me. I think those are good.
And that's it.
Wow, congratulations.
That's it?
That is all of the strategies as have been developed by Tom and Liz. Yeah, we still have lots to do, but that is all of the strategies.
Oh. Very good. Nice job, all.
All right, so next item, so we're not quite out of the woods yet with strategies. So what we sent to you all was just some feedback from from some of the different groups. So as you all know, we've been sending out the strategies to different assigned groups, and have some comments that have come back. So I think we can talk a little bit about maybe how we take some of these into account. So we have notes from, the first one is coming from the Conservation Commission. And so I can walk us through similarly to how we've been doing this.
And just for a little bit of context, we reached out to all the department heads. We reached out to different committee and commissions and organizations in town that were named. And the charge that was told to them was that we would like their feedback and that we'd bring that feedback back to the committee to consider incorporating. So that's kind of the context that these suggestions are given in, is kind of from their standpoint. This would be their suggestion, but with the awareness that this is kind of this is for the growth planning committee to figure out how best to incorporate or not these suggestions.
So just an observation. I know we have Carol in the audience, and so since I think if she'd be interested, there's an opportunity here where I don't know if she'd like to speak to some of these notes and ideas as opposed to me just reading through what's been provided. That may be better for the conversation.
Let's promote her.
Yeah, if she's willing to.
Okay. Yeah. So Carol does have her hand up. Yeah, Carol, if you want to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
So I've been multitasking, so I am not as prepared as I might be for this, but so essentially, I think our major concern in these, all of which we thought were really excellent, was that there's a lot of work involved and a lot of resources. And so we were a little hesitant to sign on to some of them or endorse some of them, because I just honestly don't see how the heck they're going to get done, even if we do have 10 years. So I guess I just thought that is something that you folks should consider as you look at these strategies. And I know it's to some extent pie in the sky or aspirational, but just having been on this committee for 6 months, I can see how it sucks up a lot of time, even if you don't try to do a whole lot.
It's a very good point, Carol, and one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that when we do this plan, that we get this out in front of the various boards and commissions and heads that we're asking folks to do, sort of meet the goals of the comp plan and to provide that kind of feedback. We did a poor job of that in the last one, and so a whole bunch of stuff that was put in there didn't really happen, nor did we do a good job in communicating that as well. So that's the piece we're trying to correct. So as you guys looked at this, were there ones that you thought, I don't know how many we have here for you?
Yeah, we did put an asterisk. If you look on the right-hand side under our comments, the ones that we asterisked are the ones that we thought were the most important.
Okay.
So I can just speak very briefly to those.
Okay.
So the Conservation Trust, strategy number 3, support the Conservation Trust. That's obviously something that is being done informally, but there's really nothing in writing about it. And I have one commission member who's constantly asking, well, what are we actually supposed to be doing? And good point. We don't really know. So perhaps this is something that we should really consider and sit down and say who does what and what really is our role versus their role, because of course we are so fortunate to have them. They actually do a lot of the things that many of the conservation commissions statewide have to do themselves. So it's just a question of figuring out who should do what and do it in writing, and that would be something that we would be happy to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So the inventory thing, I mean, that's a really big job. It's important. I think we should leave it there, but I'm not sure that a volunteer committee of currently 5 people are really ever going to find the resources to do that. So maybe, working with Warner and Eli to see how we could maybe get that done, get some grant money to get it done, once we really decide how important it is. That was not one of the things that we asterisked. And then number 5 is conduct a natural resources inventory. That's essentially, those are things that could probably be combined. Then, so education is a big piece of our mission. And that is something that in the recent survey we did that we're going to be reporting on next Monday has come out as being something that people really want. So I think this is important and that we should organize it in a way that, again, possibly get some grant money, but also collaborate. We're doing a collaboration now with the Kennebunk River cleanup with the York County Water Soil and Conservation Group. So I think more of that is just something that should be done again, and that is important. So if you guys could scroll down.
So before you scroll down, just a quick question for clarification, Carol. So like the very first strategy, where so strategy 3.
Yep.
So we wrote on the support the conservation trust, protect critical areas, blah blah blah, and what you wrote was developing a joint written agreement plan. Is that the action that you would do in support of the conservation trust, or are you suggesting that we actually change that strategy to say develop a joint written agreement?
I think I would change that strategy. Yes, because support is just sort of fuzzy, and I think
it just sometimes we do write them a little bit fuzzy to give the
I understand it's
group an opportunity to.
Yeah.
What's the best way to do that? Because we don't know. We may not know. Right? Okay.
I would. Our recommendation was that we should have something more clear in writing.
Okay. Absolutely.
And that may be a strategy if there's a desire for a written agreement like that, that may be something that you need to bring the Board of Selectmen in as, if there's any type of, I don't know that it rises to the level of what you'd classify like an interlocal agreement. I don't think it's quite that, it's not that formal, but, if there's any type of formal agreement.
Yeah, like a memorandum of understanding.
Yes, so something like that. And you don't want to, and then of course we'd have to bring the lawyers in to make sure that we weren't promising something that we didn't know about. But I think that the process would be obviously just to sit down with KCT, informally talk through it, draft something up, and then run it through the Board of Selectmen, but also the Planning Board and anyone else who has a piece of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. It's a good, who's on first, who's doing what, opportunity.
Yeah, and it might open up some better areas to collaborate that we hadn't even thought of.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
Okay. So, should I go down to 7? Okay, so this one. Conduct monitoring to evaluate the impact of pesticides and herbicides on natural resources. This is a very scientifically written strategy. And again, I think our response was we don't have the staff, the resources, the money, or in some cases the knowledge to do that. But I think what we said was identify strategies to minimize impacts of pesticides and herbicides through alternative weed and pest controls and regulations as needed. And frankly, that is something that that we are in the process of doing now as part of the pesticide survey we did, and as what we have found out from it, and that education is going to be a big piece of it. So,
Carol, my reaction is, of course, you don't have the resources to do this, but should the town be doing this, and to see if there is an impact, because you don't know what you don't know, and no one's ever looked, and I think the strategy was that somebody should look and somebody should find a way to see what the impact was. Maybe we have a significant impact. Maybe there isn't a significant impact. That's why you do science. But but
It's my understanding that the science is imprecise, that it's hard to point to what is and what isn't, and it's also very expensive. So if you want to leave it as that, but it's just not, it didn't feel realistic to us at this point in time. So I think we'd like to see the language softened a little bit.
Carol?
Hello?
Good feedback.
Yep.
Hi, it's James. Did, with part of minimizing the impacts, did that also include like seeking out alternatives?
Yes. I don't think there's any question but that pesticides and synthetic pesticides and fertilizers can have a negative impact on the environment. It's difficult to know how much. There are alternatives to both those things. And some people will tell you that they don't do as good a job. And in some cases, perhaps they don't, but like everything else in the world, it's a balance. So our goal is to get as much education out there, Jim, as possible so that people can make the choice for themselves at this point in time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, rare and endangered species. Again, yes, this is good. We asterisked this one, and we would like to work with multiple partners to, there's a lot of, our discussion was there is a lot of this information that already exists, Rachel Carson, et cetera, and we just need to get organized and reach out and then find a platform to get it out to folks. One of the things that we've discussed is that the town website is pretty rudimentary in terms of being an educational website. And I'm going to have a conversation tomorrow with Yanina to see if there's something we can do about that, or see if there's a way that we can have some kind of a jumping off place to a more extensive site so people can, know that there's one place to go in the town of Kennebunk along with partners to find out this kind of information.
Good idea.
Okay, open space. Yeah, so strategy 26 is really the KCT does this. And I don't know, that could probably be, I would say that would be something that we would write into or look at into the first strategy I talked about in terms of having something written down with a trust. As we get to the point, as you guys have already been talking about, of understanding better what the town-owned lands are and kind of town conservation lands are, we can find out, and somebody may already know this, to be honest, but we can find out if we can do a better job of helping them to link. Review use of town-owned conservation lands to ensure that activities do not damage or deplete natural resources. I think that would be part of the inventory. That would be, one of the pieces of that. So I don't think we commented on that, but could be rolled up in there. And then, so this one, strategy 28, we were a little confused in terms of what is the town, which sort of shows what the whole problem is. What is the town forest? I've seen some sort of vague maps on what it is, and I know Werner actually has told me that the planning department is working on not so much an inventory, but really getting a sense of what this is. So this certainly needs to be done, and I think that the planning department needs to be part of this as well.
No, I think that's, that's good to add us in there.
Aren't you, Werner, doing something?
I initially started to develop an inventory, and Eli has taken that and fleshed some of that out, even more so. Some of what this also just involves is looking back historically, and this is what just takes time. Sometimes there's work, a lot work like this has been done by those that have been here before us, and some of it's just been lost. So I think that is one of the things that, that we'll also take a look at, kind of understanding some of that historically. But we have a lot of that information already pulled already pulled together.
Is it mapped?
Well, it's mapped in the sense that, we have a list of parcels, that can be identified on a map. I don't think we've established a formal, like, here are all the town forest parcels. We obviously have data that shows all of town-owned parcels, but, town forest is another category. And so I don't think we've, just made that step yet to formalize that map. But we're not far from that.
Okay. And the next one, we're kind of getting, this is provide access to conservation land. We're sort of getting into the same thing, like, what do we have? We need an inventory. We did think in terms of strategy 30 that it sounded a lot like all public trails or all town-owned trails should be accessible, via ADA kind of guidelines, and make them readily accessible to a range of users, physical abilities, and activities. That is positive, but we felt a little bit like, some of the land that we have should be less accessible. Some of it should be able to be shared with, animals, and having a lot of people tramping through is not necessarily the most positive thing. So I think our response to that was a limited amount should be, or the most appropriate amount should be, or some kind of language showing that it would be, some of it would be more accessible, some of it would be less accessible. And I think what KCT is doing with the Meadowbrook plot is a good example of that. There will be handicap accessible trails around the pond, and there will be other trails that are accessible for people walking, and there will be a fair amount of it that is going to be much less accessible. And we think that's a good model.
Okay.
And finally, I think this tourism thing is a great idea, and I think that the town should really push that in terms of ecotourism is a very broad kind of thing, but what we have going for us in this town is amazing landscapes. That's why people come here. And I think we should make sure that we can keep it so, and also understand that it's an economic asset, which will help some people to be more positive in terms of protecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and I think having Chamber of Commerce in there, brings the the regional component piece to that.
Yep. Then strategy 40. Well, Werner and I have been talking a lot about invasive species lately. I do think we need a policy, and I think we need to streamline the process if at all possible. And I'll just quickly say, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, is that the Conservation Commission and the BAC both have been trying to, well, BAC has been pulling invasive species out or along the beach for several years. We had a process, a goal to do a demonstration project by the store on the path from the store to the beach, and all of these things apparently require permits. This was, and also we're going to be doing something in terms of the Kennebunk River project at the grist mill with KCT, and that's going to require a permit, which was, I'll be honest with you, news to me. So, getting rid of invasive species, of which there are a lot in town, should be something that everybody knows to try to do. And the fact that in the shoreland zone, it needs a permit is a lot of work, and frankly, putting a lot of work on Werner as well. I know we probably can't get around that, but maybe we can simplify it somehow. So.
Yeah, so just a question on this one. Are we talking about, is this a management, practice for town-owned property? Or is this something that, we're thinking that is, beyond that?
Well, that's a really good question, and I see that the way that we've written it looks like we're talking only about town-owned land. But that's only a very small part of the invasive species in town. But I think the town should take, I think it's a big enough issue so the town should take a role, a leadership role in terms of having a policy, making the policy public, and making it easier for individuals to do it on their own land.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, again, just in recognition, of what Carol and I have been working on, the permitting piece here is primarily working with the DEP for that, and so we'll only be able to have control over what local administrative requirements would be, but it does, it is a bit of a bunny trail sometimes. I think, I don't know, what did I send you? Probably, 6 different pieces of paper that,
Yeah,
that is
I only had a chance to look at them on my phone coming
Yeah.
back from a meeting, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a thing for tomorrow.
equivalent of a permit to, pull bad weeds. So, but
Yeah, it's one of those
No.
interesting situations where.
yeah, no, I don't
Good
disagree with you. It should be, there's a lot to be desired for that particular activity, that, yeah, but anyways.
Okay. So, in terms of what we said, do you need more feedback from us on how to say that? Maybe put something in there about education?
Yeah, we should have an education piece in number 40 because it's a very common question. What is this and what can I do about it?
Right.
You know,
And as long as you only do it with hand tools, it's not a huge big deal.
It matches.
Okay, so that, and then the only other thing, because it's getting late, is, I mean, the water quality, we were just like, we don't know anything about water quality. We are not the people to be in charge of this. It's critically important, but someone else needs to have oversight over this, or at least someone in addition to
Yeah,
the planning board.
that one, I think ultimately, and Eli, I don't know if we changed that one, I mean, because that's more of an ordinance-driven item, that in terms of responsible parties would really probably be planning department for that one. We may have
Yeah,
Yeah, that would
tweaked
be
that
good.
one. That
yeah,
sounds
we had
familiar to
changed
me.
their strategy number 3 to be planning department. And then, the recommendation from the Conservation Commission is to kind of remove them from strategy 3 and 4 and add planning department to both.
Yep. Yep.
So in terms of strategy 19, we just amended that to be a little broader. I mean, include a one-page summary is not, there's no point in having it be that minimal, but I'm very happy to see that the town is willing to be supportive of this, and we are definitely happy to compile as much of this educational stuff as we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that language works pretty good. I mean, it's, websites aren't in the sense of pages really, anymore,
Right,
as much as it
right.
is, the types of content that you're looking for.
So marine resources, and again, I mean, monitoring is just not something that we can do. So when our name was put on this, we weren't quite sure what you expected from us. Isn't that a state and federally protected thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's, eelgrass, yes, I mean, we don't have anything locally that we, deal with specifically on that piece, and I that's my understanding, is that it is primarily a DEP.
Right.
Not so much, I think, Army Corps, but DEP for sure.
Yeah, I think in some cases, we just thought who was the best board to maybe be the interface with what might be the outside agency that's providing information. And obviously we could be wrong in what we selected there. Maybe it should just be the planning department. So it wasn't always necessarily the work that the department had to do. but they were the ones that might be involved in overseeing or being the interface with another group that bring that information in. You know, it's like some of the ones I saw earlier might be a great opportunity if the town wants to spend the money to have a third party do the analysis on the wetlands. Right?
Yeah,
And
that
then
would
maybe
be
that goes through your group to sort of manage it. Someone else is doing the work.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
And in terms of eelgrass, I mean, that's something that is any of that having to do with the pier work? Do we know? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's, there isn't any that are identified as being impacted as part of that project.
okay. And then finally, strategy 15, reduce the flow of nitrates, blah, blah, by expanding the town's sewer service area and regulating the use of fertilizers. I would be hesitant to put regulating the use of fertilizers into the comp plan as a strategy. Because I am cognizant of the fact that we want this comp plan to be approved. And it has proven to be extremely controversial.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't want it to be a
Also
sticking
just
point.
wondering where we have this in this particular goal and where we've just went through and identified it previously, if it needs to be in this chapter.
Yeah, it may be somewhere else. Eli, what do you think?
Is this the carryover?
Are you referring to strategies 14 and 15 being
I'm-
similar, or?
No,
Well,
15,
go ahead.
being redundant.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look here.
Yeah, I thought in the plan, we stepped away from regulating the use of fertilizer and wanted to focus more on education.
So if we replace the word regulating with education, is that kind of the idea you're thinking?
Education on reduction of?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Or you could say, and reducing the use of fertilizers as opposed to regulating.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
how you reduce could be education, could be something else.
Yeah, and then you could leave, you could leave the three responsible parties in there.
Yep.
So the strategy would read, reduce the flow of nitrates into nearshore waters by expanding the town's sewer service area and reducing the use of fertilizers.
I think we said in educating regarding the reduction of fertilizer.
Okay.
So then moving on, this said maintain cooperative agreements, and we were unclear that we actually had any.
Yeah.
Do we have anything in writing or formal with Rachel Carson?
Yeah, I don't think that that's something that exists. I've not come across anything, and I'm not.
So I would just change that to develop, because it's a great idea. And then finally, the two things that we saw that were missing was to continue support and funding for the water quality testing as part of the Maine Healthy Beaches program. I didn't see that anywhere. I don't know if it needs to be here, but it's an important thing. And then secondly, the educational materials and assess need for regulation to promote regular maintenance on private septic systems, especially within river watersheds. I mean, that is something that we're going to have to look at. There's been discussions about whether that is part of the E. coli issues with Goose Rocks Beach. Nobody really knows. I think the town of Kennebunk is actually in the process of potentially passing a septic system maintenance ordinance. They seem optimistic that it's going to happen, and we have talked about trying to learn from them in terms of how they did that and so forth. So whether or not that needs to be in here or not, we don't know, but we thought we would let you know that it was something that was happening or being discussed.
Okay. No, that's good points. 2 good points. Thank you.
And that's it.
Okay.
Great.
That's great feedback. On the ones that were left blank, those are ones you felt either,
I think there were ones that we just seemed fine. We didn't have anything to say.
okay, so there were a couple, we can leave those in?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time and the time of your board to review these and provide the feedback.
We got it done in one meeting. We were very proud.
Excellent. You guys should write the plan next time.
No, 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 no.
Great. Well, thanks for, the kind of ad hoc, pull in on there. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right. So that's bringing us up to our magic witching hour. Or warlock hour.
Yeah, so we still have three documents left. We have Public Works Director feedback, Conservation Trust feedback, and Harbor Master feedback. So I don't think we're going to get through those, in a couple minutes that we have left. But
No, that wouldn't be fair to their work. So why don't we just add those to the next agenda?
okay, yep, we can do that.
And so the next meeting we have scheduled is on the 17th.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that is going to be the last meeting, according to our schedule right now, before the select board would get a final copy for review. So I think I don't know if the committee feels that we'd be able to finish the review. The Conservation Commission was the longest. The Public Works, the KCT, and the Harbor Master are quite a bit shorter.
Okay.
And if you felt like it is feasible to complete those and wrap up any loose ends, that would bring us to completion of this review of strategies, and it would then go to the select board to initiate their review.
Of the entire plan?
Of the entire plan, yeah. So essentially, we would need to have the plan into the state review office by June 10th. And so in order to do that, this committee only meets one more time before, there's a few options, but essentially that's the schedule as of right now, that the growth planning committee would meet one more time to finish, and then the select board would have 2 meetings to review, and then it would be finalized.
Okay. What do members think? Good. We haven't captured everybody's feedback, right?
I think that we may have, also a lot of feedback was just a thumbs up. So a lot of department directors we either met with or just received a sign off, or had words of encouragement or words like, yes, we're doing this, let's continue doing this. So
Okay.
What's listed here actually is all of the feedback that was, worth something to review
Okay.
that you might want to decide on. Actually, that's not entirely true. There's going to be one more batch from the planning board after they meet tomorrow. So that will be incorporated into the agenda for your next meeting. So it will be C, D, and E, and
And a couple
the
left from
remaining,
planning board.
planning board. So, May is also, there's 5 weeks in May. So if you wanted to, there's an opportunity for either another meeting or potentially, depending on schedules, rearranging.
I'm certainly open to doing another meeting in May.
Do we want to think about then just having the 31st available?
Sure. I mean, that's okay with me. Other board-
And that could be great actually, because it would give the opportunity for the select board to have their initial review on that Thursday before, and then the following Tuesday you would have an opportunity to, talk or incorporate any changes based off of that.
Yeah, well, it would either have to happen then or the following, early in June. I guess I'm a little confused on the timing in June and what our obligation is.
So the timing is that the select board will meet on June 9th, and that's the scheduled date for the select board to sign and finalize the plan. So the idea was to present to the select board one meeting prior the full plan for their review. I mean, it's already been, we've gone over it a couple times, but this is kind of in full, in final form.
So what happens between June, whatever that date is, and November? When does it go?
Yeah, so between June 10th, we don't anticipate receiving I'd have to pull up that memo. It's about 3 months in the state review office.
Oh, right.
And then the select board meets on a limited basis over the summer. So the way that the meeting schedule came out, that was the kind of a tight timeline that pointed us to that day.
Yep.
Got it.
We have a little bit of a hurry up and wait then, that we lined up with.
Yeah.
And so also, alongside of that, Tom and Liz have been, working on the data updates, which were authorized. And so that, I'm just, thinking, Eli, one of those or both of those would be, a good opportunity to bring them back in and just, and give an update in terms of, what they've been, where they stand with their updates. So.
Okay, I put it on my calendar.
So, I mean, I don't know what everyone's schedules are. I'm wondering if it makes sense to do something next Tuesday instead of waiting 2 weeks to cover at least the rest of the feedback. If folks are available. Then we've got that done. And we could have our third week meeting to kind of hash out if there's any other changes we want to make to the plan, period.
It's fine with me. 10th.
That's okay with me.
Yeah.
Does that work for you guys?
Is that possible with you guys?
31st?
Too short of a time frame.
No, that would be the 10th.
So the agenda would remain unchanged and the meeting would be just to finish the current agenda. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, and you'll see that could be not a 2-hour meeting because there's much fewer comments, but it would help in that the 17th meeting would really give you the full 2 hours to do loose ends and wrap up, and we would invite Tom and Liz to come to that.
Yep.
Right, and then we could maybe not meet on the 31st and do the June meeting to cover any changes that the selectmen felt was important before their next meeting.
Yeah. I think
The only issue is that the growth planning committee would meet on June 7th, and we need materials for the select board done by June 3rd.
Okay.
So.
Right.
All right. Well, schedule a short. Hopefully, they're not going to have major changes. So.
I mean, that being said, by all means, that is a regular meeting time, and any last minute comments or changes could be presented at the meeting itself. Mm-hmm. And it is acceptable for the select board to finalize the finished plan with a letter simply stating, ends with the following amendments, and the state review office is okay with that.
Okay.
So that's a good buffer. That would give you a little more time.
Yep. Yeah, I would. The only other thing we got to fit in here, though, is the planning boards. I know they've spent a lot of time looking at theirs and provided a lot of feedback. So we got to get that in here. So it's not necessarily just this agenda. It does include the planning board for the next meeting.
Right, next week.
Yeah. Is that doable?
Yeah. So actually, I don't know what's our public noticing requirement.
Yeah.
Is it?
As far
Is
as
it-
our meeting,
Yeah. If I made a new agenda and just added, because we already have planning board stuff from
yeah,
from the first meeting.
yeah, that's
but
fine. I
I'm
think
not
as long,
sure- Yeah. Is that okay? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So I'll do that first thing in the morning, and I'll send out an updated agenda, and that will just include the first half of the planning board material, and then the second half can be gone over on the 17th.
Okay.
So we do have the planning board comments incomplete, or we won't have it till later this week?
No, we will have them. We would have them available for the 10th. We don't have the full. All of their comments. They've got a couple left to take care of, which
Okay.
we'll do tomorrow.
Yeah, they went through half. I neglected to add it to their first round of comments to this agenda.
So we'll do it on the 10th.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll do it on the 10th.
Yep. Okay.
So we're meeting on the.
Well, we'll do the
Yeah.
first half on the 10th. We'll do the second half on the 17th.
Yes,
That's fine.
but avoiding the 31st.
Right. Avoiding the
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone on the board? Jim?
Yep.
Does that work for you, Jim?
Well, I might have to check my schedule with, kid involvement and other stuff, but I'll get
Yeah.
back to you quickly.
And we should
Okay.
plan for a hybrid. I don't know what everyone's plans are.
Yep, that's fine. We will. We'll plan for a similar options for folks if they have conflicts.
But Werner, I'm kind of confused on the whole policy, but from what I've seen from other boards, isn't every meeting a hybrid meeting so the public can come in even if all the board members are present?
That's correct. Yes, every meeting right now, is a hybrid. So, if with that idea that if we're offering up, a hybrid for the board, the public gets the same opportunity to join, whether that be in person or online.
Right. Okay. I appreciate everyone's flexibility on this. It'll be good to get through this and off to the state before they really get together and make their new rules according to the new law.
Can I make a motion, we adjourn?
Can we just do the minutes real quick? Because then Janet sent those out.
We got no Jonathan.
Yeah, so for April 5th, so I'll make a motion to accept them as written.
I'll second.
Right. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye. Any more? Liz?
Yep.
Jim?
I raised my hand, but I'm in person.
Yeah, I gotta call everybody out by roll call. So we got 4-0. So thank you very much, Janet. Motion passed. Now you can make your motion, Paul.
I make a motion, we adjourn at 8:10.
Second.
Second. Jim seconds. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Good night,
Take
everyone.
care.